when I was running kind of 1-week programs at Singularity with 80 CEOs, investors, government leaders, at the end of the week, we would get this question: okay, you've disrupted me. I get that. I got the disruption. What the hell do I do on Monday, right? And the book was an answer to that. And we basically analyzed, and we noticed that over the last decade, we've been building organizations in a completely different way than we've ever seen before. Looked at 200 unicorns and did a 1.5 years of analytical research to see how they were doing it. How was Uber growing so fast, or Facebook, or Airbnb and others, and came up with the EXO model, which is inductive. It's kind of defining and labeling what's already out there. We didn't create the model, and it's making sense now across the world. I just heard from John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, that he's a huge fan, has been using some of the models in his work. When the model basically says that there's a fundamental economic new model that's coming out in how we build businesses, and I'll just take a minute to describe it if I could. And when you're running a business, we're about demand and supply. And specifically, what's the cost of demand, or what's the cost of supply? Hopefully you're on the right side of that equation. The internet came along, and for the first time in business history, it allowed us to exponentially drop the cost of demand. Online marketing, referral marketing, every Silicon Valley company is trying for a viral loop, in which case your acquisition costs go to zero. And that's the first time in history you could acquire customers at no cost, which is amazing. And so that's great, and now we have a big phenomena. But on the supply side, what exponential organizations, or EXOs as we call them for short, have figured out is how do you drop the cost of supply exponentially. So you think about the Airbnb, the marginal cost of adding a room to their inventory is pretty much zero. Whereas if you're Hyatt, you have to build a hotel, right? Now we have hordes of startup entering legacy industries with no marginal cost of supply, and that's an existential threat to the incumbent. So now what do you do if you're in the incumbent? Is your metabolism is geared towards decade-long products and services rollouts. As Jane mentioned, in the medical industries, even it's almost 20 years to go from known cure to full deployment. It used to be 250 years, by the way, so we're better at 17 years, but still a long way to go. Now there's a huge opportunity for new companies to explode out of the gate, as we're seeing. The challenge for legacy companies is their metabolism is too slow. In Jack Welch, in his annual report in the year 2000 for GE, said the minute the metabolism of your company gets slower than the outside world, you're dead. The only question is when. I would argue that the metabolism of most big companies is slower than the outside world. So we've now been working on tool sets for how to increase that metabolism. And the way we do it is we run a 10-week program inside a large company called an EXO Sprint, which hacks culture at scale and moves leadership culture management thinking 3 years ahead in 10 weeks. And we open source that methodology in the second book. And basically the attributes you need are running a series of small, low-cost experiments at the edge, testing new business models, new technologies, new customer channels, etc. And then you double down when you see success. And internally, you need to upgrade radically the use of data, building a community, creating an MTP, a massive purpose for your company or your brand, and then changing the format of the mothership.
In your TED Talk, you do a great job of the analogy around the immune system of big organizations and how it fights back against innovation. I'm just curious if you could break that down for folks, along with elaborating a little more on the metabolism idea in relation to that.
Sure. In fact, all of my work now is based on this problem. So in the first book, Exponential Organizations, we focused on the characteristics of EXOs and the characteristics of fast-growing companies. But we spend a big chunk saying, how would you retrofit this into a legacy organization? And this comes from my time at Yahoo. I was the head of innovation there, running their incubator. And you have this massive immune system problem. Though you try something really disruptive and the antibodies come and the mothership hates you, right? And you could expect that in a bank or an old telco. But Yahoo is less than 10 years old. Why should it have this problem? And that blew my mind, and I was stuck thinking about that. And as we started advising big companies, it turned out they all have an immune system problem. Once you're over about 100 people, and it reduces the speed. And this is a huge challenge in terms of how we architect organizations going forward. Now, it's bad in the private sector and in corporates, but it's even worse in the public sector. And I think this is where the real work needs to be done. Because in the public sector, the existing policy is the immune system. Bankers are fighting Bitcoin, taxis are fighting Uber. Academics have about the worst immune system I've ever seen. Maybe religion is the ultimate immune system. And now the orthodoxy in
You're
every religion is desperately
You're
trying
right.
to maintain that line, right? And saying we're not
You're
changing.
right.
It doesn't matter what the external world says. We are not changing. We figured it out, and that's it. That's the line. And we're Amish, and we're staying this way for 600 years. And the work with you, my ecosystem now is a small private practice that does these 10-week sprints for big companies. And so we have for-profit, nonprofit immune system attack process frameworks, and a community of consultants that's about 4,000 people around the world.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.